Well, welcome to Noel's World of Whiskey, and I'm wandering from my Scotland, Ireland exploration into whiskey back to Canada, where it all started, and of course in the States, bourbon as well. What's interesting here is that I started off basically with Canadian whiskeys, and I would say that I kind of wandered away from them as I got older. My palate changed. I got more focused on Scotch. Still drank a little bit of Canadian whiskey, but certainly wandered away from the whiskeys I drank when I was younger. I was probably more drinking Crown and not the Wisers or the Gibsons and that I was drinking when I was younger. And I kind of rediscovered Canadian whiskey by accident. So I was reading, reading an article on some whiskeys, and I thought I got to try them. And one in particular was this one here. It was Lot 40. And so I did get a bottle, and I tried it. I was just blown away. This doesn't taste like the rye I remember. It doesn't taste anything like the rye I remember, and it was getting more like a single malt. It was a sipper. I don't think I've ever had this in a cocktail. I've only sipped it, and it was unique. And we're going to get into a review with this. But anyways, some of the whiskeys that I want to review, and I'm just going to go through them here. This one here, it does say rye whiskey. This is Highwood Distillers, though it says on it 90. It's Century Distillers, which was originally a Potter's whiskey, and of course Highwood bought out Potter's back in I think it was 2005, 2006, somewhere around there. But anyways, what's interesting about this rye whiskey, it says rye on it, is there is no rye in it. Now, Canadian law allows us to term anything whiskey after 3 years. And rye is a term used in Canada. It identifies with Canadian whiskey, not necessarily the content of rye. So you can call a pure corn whiskey a rye whiskey. Now this is aged 20 years, and it's aged in new oak, charred oak barrels, bourbon, and then I believe finished, if I remember rightly, in sherry casks. So a good whiskey, good price on it. This is something that we definitely want to do a review on. Highwood Distillers did not distill this. They do mostly wheat-based whiskeys. This was distilled, well, we don't know, but it came probably from Potter's, which was a Kelowna distillery that sold out to Highwood Distillers. Now, this Canadian, and it is a rye whiskey. It's 100% rye, and it's a Dr. Livermore recreation. And I will be getting into telling the story on that one, but it was Joshua Booth back in the late 1700s. We're talking about the American Revolution, and he was an Empire loyalist. He actually fought on the British side. I'm certain the Americans will love that one that are drinking this. But he had about 5 or 6, 7 gristmills, I believe. And after the war, after he came back and he settled in, I think it was around the Earnsville area on Lake Ontario. This was one of his mills on Lot 40, and he produced this. And the recipe was revived by Michael Booth, who was the master blender distiller back in 1998 for Heimbach, and 6th, 7th generation from the original Joshua Booth. He recreated this. So, okay, moving on, and we will do a review on that one. So moving on, another one of Dr. Ron Livermore's presentations. This is a Pike Creek, and it's a 21-year-old. I'm looking forward to getting into that and doing a review on that one. That one hasn't even been cracked. So that is another one of Dr. Livermore's recreation. And of course, one of my dad's favorites was Canadian Club. Now he did like his scotches, and he did bring back Scotch, probably how I got into Scotch. He brought it back. He was a World War II fighter. Actually, he was the Battle of Britain fighter pilot. And he was over there right at the beginning because he had a pilot's license. He's one of the few Canadians going over there with a pilot's license. With the Canadian Air Force, he helped the RAF fight the German onslaught of planes, Göring's Luftwaffe, where they were outnumbered, 9-10 to 1 at one stage, and he was in the Battle of Britain. So that's a story in itself. But what the real story is, he brought back the British Scottish culture and the whiskey, the Scotch whiskey, which of course we used to sneak into as kids. And that was my influence on Scotch. So, but I also played around a bit with rye whiskey, and but not Canadian Club. This was my dad's whiskey, not this one, but Canadian Club, the regular Canadian Club, that traditional bottle. Because this was one of his favorites, I bought this. This is a 42-year-old. These were the oldest. The Chronicle series were the oldest whiskeys bottled in Canada. For the public. So this is I got a 42 and a 44, and I'm going to crack this one open. I'm going to have it with my brother and family in memory of my dad and my mom, who just recently passed away last year. This is a whiskey I'm looking forward to, and my understanding again is this one is old. It's an old bottling of corn whiskey. Cured in 10-year-old. These were 10-year-old whiskey barrels. They were bourbon barrels that were filled with 10-year-old whiskey, and then bottled with this. And I think there might have been a rebottling of this, and I'll have to check it out. They might have been, some of them were rebottled, maybe in sherry casks or whatever. We'll find that one out. Anyways, this is a start. These are whiskeys that I will do a review on, and I'm going to start with the Lot 40. That was the one that kind of got me going back into the Canadian whiskeys and that. So we will get started on the Lot 40. Well, this is Lot 40. The rye that kind of got me back into Canadian whiskeys. This is a Dr. Livermore presentation, and I'm going to tell you sort of a brief history on this. This was a recreation of the original Joshua Booth. Goes back to the late 1700s. He fought as a United Empire loyalist against the Americans in the American Revolution. I'm certain the Americans will love to hear this when they're drinking a Lot 40. But anyways, it was he was a fellow that after the war he settled on Lake Ontario there near Earnsville, and he was very successful businessman. He had something like 6 mills. I believe one of those mills was on Lot 40. And every grist mill he had a still, and so he was distilling this probably from a mash, because it'd be more like American whiskey. And in this case, I believe it was a 90% rye and 10% malted rye mash. And of course, today we do these grains separately in Canada, not like the States in their bourbons and that. So it was his descendant. We're talking, boy, are we 6 generations later? So this was a 6th generation great grandfather of Michael Booth, who was the master blender, master distiller for Hiram Walker. And he kind of recreated this somewhere around, I think it was 1998. And of course, it lasted for a few years and that. And now when it actually disappeared, I'm not certain. Sometime in the 2000s, kind of disappeared. And, there was a real callback from people that wanted to see this whiskey again. So Dr. Don Livermore reintroduced the Lot 40 in 2012. The recipe was changed a bit. So in 2012, it was, as the original, 10% malt and 90% malted rye and 90% rye. And they went back to, and it wasn't column still, it was pot still, a 12,000 liter pot still they used to go 100% rye, no malted rye. They took that out of the recipe, and Dr. Don Livermore had his reasons, and basically in 2013, the new whiskey, the Lot 40, which has won an amazing number of awards, one of the most award-winning whiskeys in the country, at a very reasonable price, and they are very focused on using Brasetto Rye. So there's a lot we can say about the whiskey. There's a lot of people who have written up on this whiskey. So again, it reintroduced in 2012, recipe change 2013, and basically maybe a few tidbits about Dr. Don Livermore. He's written some books, actually quite a few books, but a couple of the books that I got turned on to, just doing research in that on the whiskey, because of I favored this whiskey, first whiskey for many, many years, that I've really said that I in a rye whiskey that I liked, because I sort of turned off to ryes. And I kind of mentioned to my son about this Dr. Don Livermore. He's a researcher, working on his doctorate and all that. So anyways, he gets me a couple of these books that I mentioned to him for Christmas. And here they are. Of course, first book here is Blending 101. And the second book is, of course, Keeper of the History. Now, these are both fascinating books. Now, this book here gives you the whole history of Canadian whiskey. Boy, if you like history and you want to learn a little bit more how big Canadian whiskey distillers were. I mean, they were the largest distilleries in the world and the largest producers of whiskey at one time in the world. So it's an interesting history, what you'll learn from this. And of course, when we get into the Blending 101, this is the science, we'll say the more current science of blending and distilling of whiskeys. And because I'm more of a study of the Scottish and Irish distillers and how they use a lot of traditional methods, and I think there is certainly some headbutting as to old traditional versus the newer methods of distilling, and I believe that Dr. Livermore, of course, to get a doctorate, and he was really a chemist, but to get a doctorate in distilling and blending, you have to have some understanding of the traditional methods. And he's also worked with master blenders and master distillers, so he's had that knowledge passed on to him. So I think that he's basically he has learned how to approach it from either a scientist's focus or someone that actually has a palate like me or you and likes the taste of whiskey. And in the end, he's going to taste that whiskey. And, you can put as much science into it as you want, but it's the customer that's making you a profit. And these companies have to make a profit to survive. So in the end, you sell a product at a time when we're seeing more and more craft distillers are emerging across this country. I remember when I first learned about the distillery not too far from where I live. It was the second malt distillery in Canada. And today there's dozens of malt distilleries in Canada. But at the time it was the second. I think the first one was out in the Cape Breton on the Cabot Trail. It just shows how things have changed. The number of distilleries in this country today, and most of them are craft distilleries. And that's a key competition with the big distilleries like Hiram Walker. Now Corby's, basically, they produced the Lot 40. It is produced in the, I guess we'll call it Walkerville and Windsor, the Windsor plant. And we're going to get into the review on that. So, let's get started. Lot 40. We'll start off with the nose. Now, there isn't a lot of, I mean, it's getting the coloring from the casks, and I know that these are number 2 and number 4 casks. This is, by the way, 48 ABV. Part of the reason that Dr. Livermore went to 48 ABV is to pull more out of these two casks that are going to be married together. Now, these were number 2 charred and number 4. Now, number 2 is a little milder char than a number 4 char. It's all basically how intense the charring is in the barrel is the number. So they started it off in a number 2, they finish it off in a number 4. Part of the rationale behind that is that as you char the barrel more, you pull more of that lignum out of the barrel. Those molecules that our tongue detects, the sweetness, and the various other notes that we're getting. As he would describe them, and I've read some of his descriptors and his scientific terminology. I've just forgotten them. They're in these books, by the way, if you buy these books. You know, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get more of that in the whiskey so you can taste it. So the nose. So right off the bat, I'm getting some sweetness mixed with, pumpernickel bread. Maybe even a little bit of eucalyptus menthol in the background there. Cinnamon. And ginger snaps. You know, I'll be honest with you. I've noticed this numerous times. I've been into the bottle, and every once in a while I get something different. So the pumpernickel bread, that's a new one for me. I do like the pumpernickels, the rye breads. I have had the ginger snaps before, but the potpourri is basically what I'm getting. It's like a potpourri pot is what I'm smelling. So very floral. Ginger. I'm getting the citrus notes with the ginger notes, and slight. There's just very slight something burnt there. Not. I'm going to say a burnt matchstick, but it's not the sulfury end of it. It's more like a burnt the wood, the burnt matchstick. It's the wood. And that's got to be the charred barrel, the charred oak. There's a lot of layers here, and I can keep going on and on and on. I've done numerous nosings of this. It wasn't on camera, but I always seem to get something new every time I do it. But let's move on. It's got layers. It's for you to nose, and as we get through the review there, I think that's what the importance is this worth going out and buying a bottle? So the palate. Cilantro. And here's where I get a little confused, because the initial taste, yeah, there's rye. I get that I do get the rye, and you know, Not like the rye that I drank when I was younger. It's if you could taste the if you could taste the potpourri pot of whatever the ingredients are, that's what it is. That's what I'm tasting. I'm tasting floral notes, but with it, the ginger snap cookies. You know, I get a little closer here. I'm going to say maybe pine needles. Maybe that's where I have to go. Eucalyptus. It's those aromatic notes, and I'm actually tasting them. If I could taste a really nice sweet tobacco, not a tobacco that has a real bite and a burn, but a sweet tobacco, I'm getting a little bit of that as well, and some chocolate, dark chocolate, with a bit of molasses. In other words, I'm getting stuff that was in the nose. I'm sort of like getting it into my palate here, and these aren't things we normally would eat, but it's a taste thing here, and that's what I'm tasting. A little bit of the pepper now coming through, and that's what I would expect from a rye, but still the floral and the herbal layers, that's what I'm tasting. And when we said the pine needles, I finally think I've discovered something there, because I haven't mentioned that one before, but that's kind of closer to where I am, and you know, there's no bite to it, there's no bitterness to it. I would say the slight bits of vanilla sneak in, but we're talking maybe even a little bit of shortbread, but not dominating like a sherry dessert scotch or something like that. It's still the strength of this whiskey is the floral, herbal, and you know, a bit of the spices, but really pleasant to the palate. I mean, the finish is going to be a medium, I say, but let's go for the finish here. I'm getting the pine now. Now I'm identifying the mint, the herbal tea, and some orange, the citrus. I mentioned the citrus. This is very, very pleasant, and the ginger snaps, but the sweetness is still there, and I'm going to say the medium finish, short to medium finish, toward the tail end of it. Wee bit of that, again, a little bit of that burnt wooden matchstick, but not the sulfury notes. So, but let's get some water in this, and let's check it out with water, okay? So. So I do think that water will be okay in a 48. I think we've got enough ABV there that actually the water might even help it a bit. So we're going to see what else we can bring out in this with the water. Oh yes, so we just changed the profile again. Lots of citrus, lots of fruit. I'm in a fruit garden. So our potpourri pot has just gotten very citrusy. But again, Chard Gardens in the spring. And that's a famous garden in Victoria, by the way, for you that do not know about Chard Gardens. And it is seasonal, different times of the year, different things bloom. And wow, beautiful nose. I am getting some mandarins, that's a citrus. Not as much pine, but still some aromatic, you know, I guess you could say a wee bit of pine, but the aromatic mentholy notes, eucalyptus. Nice. Palate. Boy, did it sweeten it up. I'm going to chew this for a while. And now we're honey dipped. We've got honey coated ginger snaps, and certainly the hotter pepper spices have disappeared, and we're getting maybe a little bit of the milder nutmeg. I'm getting definitely fennel. I'm going to say we got some grassy stuff going on here, but sweet grass. And these aren't typical things I taste in a rye. A little more dessert oriented after adding the water there. I'm actually amazed with, I'm going to say that the finish is actually, if we're going to say it's a short medium, it's a longer short medium, that's for sure. So I'm going to say maybe it's a medium short. How's that? Or a short medium. The fruit, but more ripe fruit, and I'm going to say ripe pears and ripe apples. Good descriptor for it. Anyways, you know, that's going to be it. I'm ready to give this a score. When I'm scoring these, I look at a rye a little different than a Scotch. I don't think there's a rye that I used to drink. I don't, you know, Weiser's, well, certainly the Gibsons and that I used to drink. I don't think they would have hit the 80 mark. Those early ryes were pretty harsh, and you know, I just, my palate's changed, and also I've evolved with my with my nose and my palate, and also my study of whiskey, and getting back into ryes. This is completely different than the ryes I used to drink. It's in a whole different league. So where my other ryes would never have made even the 80 mark, this guy's probably going to make the 80 mark. And I'm going to say, you know, 81, 82, somewhere in that area there is where he belongs. It's a good whiskey. This is a whiskey to have on your shelf. Lot 40. It's basically finished in a number 4 charred barrel. Starts in a number 2, so double barreled. Interesting bottle. I like the label on it. Very interesting whiskey. This is under 60 bucks. It's good value for your money. I am giving this a mark rated on the price as well. For $60. And the fact that they can actually pull something, I didn't think rye could ever have that much to offer in that complex, layered, different flavors and notes. So certainly well worth the experience. So 82 is where I'm going to leave it, and I'm going to ask you to drink wisely, drink intelligently, do not drink and drive, and until the next time, so much.